Jai Am Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Pavan Janardan Maharaj Ki Jai.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatha Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sya Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shivishikam Vidam Sya Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyanajana Shilagaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Nama Gurva Bhishtam Supurakam Gurganar Isha Sambhushitam Chintya Chintya Samastavena Nipanam Shri Rupa Patanugam Govinda Abhidam Ujwalam Bharatanum Bhaktyan Vidam Sundaram Bande Vishwagurun Shah Divyat Bhagawat Premnavi Bija Pranam Devam Divyatanum Suchandavaranam Balarka Chelanchitam Sandrananda Puram Sadekam Varanam Vairagya Vidyamburim Sri Siddhanta Nidhim Subhakti Lasitam Saraswatanam Baram Bandetam Shivanam Madeka Sharanam Nyasishvara Shidaram Vanshakopatarubyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahamananyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratavishe Namah. So we're reading from the Sri Chaitanya Bhagawat by Srila Vrindaban Das Thakur with translation by Sarvabhavana Prabhu. This is the Adi-khanda, chapter 16, the Glories of Srila Haridas Thakur. Yesterday we heard the first part of this chapter, how the Muslims were very angry because Haridas Thakur was chanting the holy name and not following, according to their estimation, the Muslim religion, and then was ordered that Haridas Thakur, by the Muslims, that he would be beaten to death, beaten in 22 marketplaces, and flogged mercilessly. So, but even though Thakur was beaten so heavily in so many marketplaces, he continued chanting, and his persecutors realized that he was a saint. He just continued chanting, and they commented that an ordinary person would have died in the first 1 or 2 marketplaces, but he survived all 22 marketplaces, and then they realized they were mistreating a saint, and they became very sober about that. So, continue here. This is what the Supreme Lord Krishna Govinda directly protected Haridas Thakur, therefore who could harm him? If one simply remembers the name of Haridas, not to mention his terrible ordeal at the hands of the Muslims, one becomes freed from one's own pain and misery. Most certainly, Srila Haridas Thakur was one of the closest and most important associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Chandra. Haridas floated downstream on the currents of the Ganga, and after some time, he became conscious by the Lord's desire, because the Nawab ordered that he should not be buried, but he should be thrown in the Ganga. That was also done as a punishment. Fully awakened and overwhelmed with ecstasy, he climbed the bank of the Ganga and proceeded towards Fulia, loudly chanting the name of Krishna as he walked. When the Muslims saw Haridas Thakur, they were convinced that he possessed extraordinary mystic powers. Pure, happy feelings replaced the envy and hate in their hearts. They offered him obeisances, worshiping him as a very saintly person. By this worship, the Muslims became free from material entanglement. Later, in the presence of the Nawab, Haridas smiled compassionately at the Muslim ruler, who stood remorsefully with folded hands, feeling great awe and reverence. In a humble and meek voice, the Nawab said, I can now understand that you are truly a saintly person. You have realized the absolute truth, and you have seen the one Supreme Lord everywhere and in everyone. You are a perfected soul and have actually attained absolute knowledge and liberation, of which the mystic yogis and philosophers falsely and proudly boast. I have come just to see you, simply to beg forgiveness. Kindly forgive me for the offenses I've committed against you. Since you see everyone equally, you have neither friends nor enemies. There is no one in the entire world that can actually grasp your extraordinary position. You are a free man in every respect. You may stay in a lonely hut or a cave on the bank of the river Ganga, or wherever you so wish. From now on, you may stay anywhere and do whatever you please. However, please be merciful upon those of us who have committed this great offense against you. Everyone, whether elevated or wretched, automatically forgets about mundane life when he sees the lotus feet of Srila Haridas Thakur. The Muslims had been angry enough to kill him, yet they were transformed and they worshipped his feet, accepting him as a holy man. After forgiving and blessing them, Haridas went to Fulia. With the holy name resounding from his lips, he reached an assembly of Brahmins near Fulia. The Brahmins were overjoyed by his arrival, and they joined him in a roaring kirtan. As he danced in their midst, he felt ecstatic joy sweeping through his body, crying, shivering, laughing, swooning, horripilation, and roaring loudly. He fell to the ground totally immersed in love of Krishna. The Brahmins could not contain their unbounded joy. After some time, Srila Haridas calmed himself and spoke to the Brahmins who sat around him. My dear Brahmin friends, do not feel sad because of what happened to me. This punishment was certainly due me. I stood in the court and listened to the Muslims blaspheme my Lord. For this the Lord has punished me suitably. I am actually very happy because my punishment should have been more severe. The Lord has let me off very lightly. One goes to hell if he hears blasphemy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. My sinful ears were filled with such blasphemy, and the Lord has given me the proper punishment so that I may never commit this offense again. Srila Haridas passed his time relishing the nectar of the holy name and giving his enlightening association to the Brahmins. Those Muslims who had tortured Das Thakur and their families as well were all eventually destroyed. Haridas left the village and moved into a cave on the banks of the river Ganga, where he maintained himself on the sweetness of the holy name and the memory of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord. Daily he chanted a minimum of 300,000 names of Krishna. By the influence of the transcendental sound of the holy name and the holy presence of Srila Haridas Thakur, the cave was transformed into a Vaikuntha planet of the spiritual sky. In Haridas's cave lived a large and poisonous snake that emitted such strong vapors that not a soul could remain in the cave for more than a moment. People from the village came every day to visit Haridas, but they could not stay long enough to speak with him. Although the visitors were all driven away by the poisonous air, Haridas was completely oblivious to the presence of the snake. The Brahmins consulted one another about the foul air in the cave and then discussed the matter with some Ayurvedic physicians in Fulia. After some research, they determined that a poisonous snake had indeed built its home within Haridas's cave. The physicians felt strongly that Haridas should vacate his cave, for living with such a snake was improper. They joined the Brahmins and approached Haridas to explain the situation. On account of the vapors from a poisonous snake living within your cave, no one can remain here, they explained. You should also vacate this place and find a more suitable cave to live in. I have been living in this cave for a long time, and I have never been inconvenienced by the vapors you speak of, replied Haridas. However, if none of you can remain within the cave and it causes you such distress, then I shall leave here tomorrow. If it is true that a snake lives here, and if he does not leave by tomorrow, then I shall certainly go. I can assure you that one of us will leave this cave by tomorrow. Please do not worry about this problem any longer. I'm concerned that all of you not waste your time in futile, mundane talks. Every moment should be utilized discussing topics of Krishna consciousness. In the course of this discussion, a miracle occurred. Evening had gradually descended around the Haridas and Brahmins. When the snake slithered out of its hole, its huge, frightening body, crossed with effulgent red, yellow, and blue stripes, and crowned with a brilliant gem, slid quietly past the Brahmins and left the cave forever. Its appearance was both awesome and attractive, and as it slithered past, the Brahmins remembered Krishna as their only shelter. After the snake left, the burning sensation from the poisonous air also vanished, and all the Brahmins were satisfied. Their faith in the extraordinary spiritual potency of Haridas Thakur swelled, for they understood that the snake had left because of Haridas' assurance to the visitors. Simply the sight of Haridas dissipates one's innate nescience and material entanglements. Out of his love for Haridas, the Supreme Lord never minimizes or neglects Haridas's words. Another similar incident is related to a snake charmer. One day in the courtyard of a rich man's house, this snake charmer was performing a snake dance. He was chanting a special mantra accompanied by musicians playing the mridanga and mandira. Haridas was passing by and stood to one side watching the snake dance. Although the snake charmer was an ordinary human being, by the influence of his mantra, he could dance as though the spirit of the king of the snakes, Anantasesha, possessed him. With an enchanting melody, he sang about the pastime of Lord Krishna in the lake called Kaliyadaha, where the Lord had vanquished an evil serpent called Kaliya. Haridas listened intently to the pastime of his beloved Lord Krishna, and suddenly, moved by ecstasy, he fell unconscious to the ground. When he regained consciousness, he jumped to his feet and roared like a lion, dancing in ecstasy as he babbled with joy. The snake charmer was impressed by the manifestation of ecstatic symptoms in Haridas's body and stood respectfully to the side. As the various symptoms of horripilation, crying, and shivering traversed Haridas's body, he roared in the dust, crying in love for Krishna. Horripilation means standing of the hairs on end. He remembered how his beloved Lord had mercifully saved the snake Kaliya, and as he floated in ecstatic trance, the people around him obliged by singing songs about the wonderful pastimes of the Lord. The snake charmer simply stood to the side, overcome by beyond reverence for Haridas. When his ecstasy subsided, Haridas left, and the snake charmer resumed his performance. Everyone who witnessed the ecstasy of Haridas felt spiritually exhilarated, and they smeared their body with dust from his feet. However, one cunning and deceitful Brahmin in the crowd decided to cheat the people. I will also dance here, he told himself. I will also dance here, he told himself. I can see that the people are not very intelligent. They are offering so much respect to this low-born Haridas just because he dances and cries. If I, a Brahmin, also dance and cry, then they will certainly worship me as well. The Brahmin threw himself on the ground and feigned unconsciousness, as though he had fallen into trance. However, as soon as he touched the ground, the dancing snake charmer became furious, picked up a stick, and began beating the Brahmin relentlessly. He struck him repeatedly on every part of his body until the Brahmin, howling in agony, got up and ran away just to save his life. The snake charmer then resumed his dance while the entire crowd stood dumbfounded. At last, a man with folded hands humbly requested the snake charmer to explain why he had stood respectfully to the side while Haridas danced, yet he had beaten the Brahmin for what seemed to be the same activity. The spirit of Ananta Sesh, who dwelt within the snake charmer, then spoke in glorification of Srila Das Thakur. The subject matter of your inquiry is very confidential. Although such a topic is rarely discussed because of its highly esoteric nature, I shall nevertheless answer your question. When Srila Das Thakur was dancing in ecstatic trance, each one of us felt our respect and affection for him spontaneously increase. However, the deceitful Brahmin was simply imitating Haridas in order to get some cheap adoration from the crowd. Not out of love for Krishna, but out of enviousness towards a pure devotee, the Brahmin threw himself on the ground and feigned ecstasy. Furthermore, he interrupted my dancing. Since he disturbed me and tried to imitate the pure devotee, I punished him severely. This arrogant and deceitful Brahmin has no love for Krishna. To receive the shelter of devotional service at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, one has to become pure, free from deceit. By seeing Srila Haridas Thakur dance, one becomes liberated from material bondage. Even the Supreme Lord Krishna himself dances when he sees Srila Haridas Thakur dance. The entire universe becomes cleansed of all sinful reactions just by seeing Srila Haridas dance. He is truly worthy of his name, Haridas Thakur, the servant of the Supreme Lord, Hari Krishna, who shines eternally like a full moon in the heart of his devotees. Haridas is affectionate and compassionate toward all living entities, and he descends as the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord in each of the Lord's incarnations. He is free from any fault or offense towards the Supreme Lord or his devotees. Even in his dreams, he never commits an offense. A moment's association with Haridas can purify any living entity and assure him the eternal shelter of Lord Krishna's lotus feet. Even Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva constantly desire his association. Haridas appeared in the family of a lowly Muslim on the order of the Supreme Lord, just to teach human society that material designations like caste, creed, birth status, and family position are all illusory, and pursuing them is futile. If a pure devotee of the Lord is born in a low-class family, he is no less worthy of worship. This is the injunction of the scriptures. On the other hand, if someone is born in a sophisticated family, but does not worship the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, then his high birth is useless, for he lives just like a resident of hell. Just to prove the truth of these scriptures, Srila Haridas Thakur took birth in a low-caste family. Prahlad Maharaj, one of the greatest devotees of the Lord, had previously appeared in a family of demons, and Hanuman, the greatest devotee of Lord Ramachandra, took birth in the monkey species. The demigods desire the touch of the pure and transcendental form of Srila Haridas Thakur, and Ganga Mata also prays that her water will be sanctified by his presence. However, one need not touch Srila Das Thakur. Simply by seeing him, one is automatically freed from the eternal cycle of birth and death. Furthermore, one who sees a devotee who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of Srila Haridas Thakur is also granted freedom from material bondage. Furthermore, one who sees a devotee who has taken shelter at the lotus feet of Srila Haridas Thakur is also granted freedom from material bondage. Neither 1,000 mouths nor 1,000 ears would be sufficient to describe and hear the wonderful qualities of Srila Haridas. You are a fortunate soul, for your inquiry has given me an opportunity to glorify the pure devotee and has given you the opportunity to hear the transcendental topic. From the moment a person speaks the name of Srila Haridas Thakur, his ascension to the supreme abode of Lord Krishna is guaranteed. Nagaraj, the snake charmer, then fell silent. The assembled Brahmins and pious gentlemen felt thoroughly satisfied by his glorification of Srila Haridas. Of course, Ananta Sesh is a pure Vaishnava devotee of the Supreme Lord and is always engaged in glorifying the Lord and his devotee. This was not his first occasion to describe the outstanding qualities of Haridas. The assembly accepted the Nagaraj's appraisal of Haridas and the love each person felt for Haridas increased. Srila Haridas was a pure devotee of Lord Chaitanya, and although Sri Gaurachandra was yet to reveal the process of devotional service to the Supreme Lord, Haridas continued to demonstrate his love for Sri Krishna. People in general were disinterested in the process of devotional service, and they could not understand the purpose behind chanting the holy name of Krishna. On account of a general apathy towards the holy name, the mood of devotional service was absent in society. People taunted and jeered at the Vaishnavas who engaged in kirtan. So the saintly devotees assembled in a quiet spot away from everyone where they could sing and dance undisturbed. Even then, atheistic people angrily condemned them. These degraded Brahmins will completely destroy this entire country, they complained. All this loud, sentimental singing and dancing will probably cause a famine in the land. These emotionalists sing like this just to fill their bellies, not realizing that Lord Vishnu is taking rest during these 4 months of the rainy season. So now we're in these 4 months of the rainy season, the Chaturmasya. All this loud, sentimental singing and dancing will probably cause a famine in the land. These emotionalists sing like this just to fill their bellies, not realizing that Lord Vishnu is taking rest during these 4 months of the rainy season. They will just disturb him, and in irritation, he will send some natural calamity. Can't these fools understand the disaster they could cause? Another man threatened, if there is an increase in the price of food grains, then I will catch them one by one and beat them soundly. It may be proper to chant loudly on the night of Ekadasi, but what is the use of this daily recitation of Govinda's names? Questioned another irritated atheist. The devotees felt genuine compassion for the atheistic people, and despite their harassment, the devotees continued the kirtans. Srila Haridas was one of those sincere devotees who felt sorry to see that the majority of the people in society were not the least inclined toward devotional service. He continued his loud chanting of Krishna's holy name, which the extremely sinful people in society found unbearable. Once in a village called Harinadi, an arrogant Brahmin offended Srila Haridas. He shouted angrily, "Hey Haridas, why do you behave like this? Why must you chant so loudly? The actual injunction is to chant softly in your mind. Which scripture instructs you to chant loudly? Who has taught you this type of religious practice? Here is an assembly of scholars. You can ask them about the correct method of worship." Srila Haridas replied, "I do not know the scriptural conclusions about the glories of the holy name of Krishna. You must certainly know more than I. I can only repeat what I have heard from scholars like yourself. The principal effect of chanting the name of Krishna loudly is that it purifies the soul 1,000 times more than any other form of worship. Nowhere in the scriptures is loud chanting of the holy name condemned. On the contrary, there are excellent benefits which have been described in many places. In one scripture it says, loud chanting of Lord Krishna's name is 1,000 times better than silent chanting. Why is the result of loud chanting magnified 1,000 times over any other process? Demanded the Brahmin. My dear sir, please listen to the conclusions of the Vedas in Srimad Bhagavatam. As Srila Haridas spoke, he floated in the ocean of love of Krishna, and his explanations encapsulated the essence of all scriptures. O Brahman, please try to understand that when any living entity, be it human, animal, insect, or bird, hears the holy name chanted by a pure devotee of the Lord, he goes directly to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, after leaving this body. The Srimad Bhagavatam states, O Lord, when your holy name is chanted by the unalloyed devotee who has been purified by the touch of your lotus feet, and that holy name is heard even once by any living entity, it can immediately purify both the chanter and the listener. There is nothing disputable in the matter of the unalloyed devotee purifying other living entities, lower species, which do not possess the ability to chant the Lord's name, can be liberated simply by hearing the name chanted by a pure devotee. One who chants the holy name to himself liberates himself only, but one who chants the Lord's name loudly liberates anyone who hears him. The sound of the Lord's name is beneficial for everyone. Therefore, the scriptures all assert that loud chanting of the Lord's name is 1,000 times more effective than any other religious process. Again, in the Naradiya Purana, there is a quote from Prahlad Maharaj saying, I see perfect logic in the fact that a person who chants the Lord's name loudly is 1,000 times more pious than the person who chants to himself. One who chants loudly liberates only himself, but one who chants softly liberates only himself, but one who chants loudly liberates himself and any other living entity who hears him. O Brahman, please listen carefully. It is easy to understand that a person who acts for the benefit of the entire society, including the lower animals, is certainly on a higher religious platform than a person who is simply concerned with his own liberation. Only the human being has been endowed with the capacity to utter the Lord's name. An animal can't. Only the human being has been endowed with the capacity to utter the Lord's name. An animal cannot. If loud chanting can liberate these unfortunate animals who otherwise have no hope for salvation, then what is the harm in chanting loudly? A selfish person is interested in his own welfare, but a selfless devotee is concerned with everyone's welfare. If you understand this, you can easily determine who is on the higher platform. I must emphasize that loud chanting of the Lord's holy name is the most efficacious type of chanting. The foolish Brahmin became even more infuriated by the unequivocal instruction of Srila Haridas. He angrily retorted, O Haridas, you have now become the master of the Vedas. It seems you have propounded the seventh philosophical thought, the other six having been destroyed with the passing of time. It has been prophesied in the Vedas that at the end of Kali Yuga, a low-born Shudra will propagate the Vedas. However, I see it already happening right before me. What is the need to wait for the end of the Kali Yuga? You deceive everyone by acting like a holy man, but all you do is visit the homes of householders and fill your belly. If I find your explanations unauthorized and incorrect according to Shastra, then I will cut off your ears and nose. Completely equipoised, Srila Haridas simply smiled at the harsh, revengeful words of the fallen Brahmin. Without another word, he walked away chanting loudly the Lord's holy name. The scholars of the assembly were as sinful as that vicious Brahmin, for they neither accepted the correct bona fide explanations of Srila Thakur, nor did they condemn the offensive words of the wretched Brahmin. These men were Brahmins in name only, while in actuality they were demons. Their residence was hell, and they would suffer untold misery in the hands of Yamaraj, the god of death. In Kali Yuga, the demons will be born as Brahmins that harass and offend pious people. The Varaha Purana says, in the Kali Yuga, demons find shelter in the Brahmin families and torture the transcendentalists, who are rare souls. All the scriptures have strictly forbidden us to touch, hear, or worship persons who live in the guise of a Brahmin. One simply becomes contaminated. One simply becomes contaminated by their contact. The Varaha Purana says in the Kali Yuga, demons find shelter in Brahmin families and torture the transcendentalists who are rare souls. All the scriptures have strictly forbidden us to touch, hear, or worship persons who live in the guise of a Brahmin. One simply becomes contaminated by their contact. In the Padma Purana is mentioned, there is no need for a detailed explanation. Those Brahmins who are not devotees of the Lord should neither be respected nor touched by anyone. Meeting a non-devotee Brahmin is as contaminating as meeting a low-born dog-eater. On the other hand, a pure devotee of the Lord, born in any family or any class, can purify the entire universe. A few days after this incident with Srila Haridas, the fallen Brahmin contracted such a severe case of smallpox that his nose fell off. Or we'd say, here it says smallpox, we hear leprosy, but in any event, his nose fell off. He was justly punished by Krishna for his offenses against the Vaishnava saint. Aggrieved, Haridas sighed in deep concern over the sad state of the human society, which was engrossed in mundane life. For a long time, he had desired the association of other pure devotees, so he went to Navadip, where the Vaishnavas were overjoyed to see him. Sri Advaitacharya Prabhu grasped him to his chest in a loving embrace, and the other devotees showered their affection upon him. Similarly, he reciprocated their emotions. The atheists continued their offense. The atheists continued their offensive criticism of the devotees, while the Vaishnavas consulted their transcendental discussion of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. The atheists continued their offensive criticism of the devotees, while the Vaishnavas continued their transcendental discussion of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyone who listens with faith and devotion to these narrations will find eternal shelter at the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Sri Gaurachandra. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Prabhu are my life and soul. I, Vrindaban Das, humbly offer this song at their lotus feet. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama, Hari Haraya Nama, Krishna Jadavaya Nama, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama, Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Nama, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinatha Marana Mohan, Giridhari Gopinatha Marana Mohan, Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra, Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra, Garadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Garadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath, Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath, H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan, H.I. Gosai Kori Charana Bandhan, Jao ete vignana shabishta puran, Jao ete vignana shabishta puran, H.I. Gosai Jarmui Taradas, H.I. Gosai Jarmui Taradas, Tasabar Padarenu Mora Panchagras, Tasabar Padarenu Mora Panchagras, Tader Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas, Tader Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanibas, Janame Janame More Abilas, Janame Janame More Abilas, H.I. Gosai Jabe Brache Koilabas, H.I. Gosai Jabe Brache Koilabas, Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash, Radha Krishna Nitya Leela Korila Prakash, Anande Bolo Hari Bansha Vrindavan, Anande Bolo Hari Bansha Vrindavan, Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Manjai Aman, Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Manjai Aman, Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas, Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas, Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamudas, Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamudas, Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas, Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koryas, Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamudas, Harinam Sankirtana Kohe Naratamudas, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Haribo. Jai Saparikara Shri Shri Guru Guranga Gandharvika Giridhari Ju Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Nirmalacharya Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya Tara Sadasi Srimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parabhajakacharya Ashta Tara Sadasi Srimad Srila Bhakti Rakshidhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Gaur Kishordas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Rupanuga Guru Marga Ki Jai. Namachari Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jiva Gopal Bhatta Dash Raghunath, Shad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai, Premsiko Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasane, Shri Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Vishwavaranya Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Namadeep Dham Ki Jai, Shri Ram Mayapur Ki Jai, Saparshada Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai, Saparshada Shriman Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, Shri Kuladvip Ki Jai, Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai, Soquel Shri Chaitanya Saraswat Seva Ashram Ki Jai, Ganga Devi Ki Jai, Tulasi Maharani Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shri Vrindaban Dham Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Govardhan, Sham Kuna Radha Kunda Kalindi Yamuna Ju Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Hare Nam Sankirtan Ki Jai, all the assembled devotees Ki Jai, Shri Chaitanya Bhagawat Ki Jai, Srila Vrindaban Das Thakur Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Bo.
Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Pavan Janardan Maharaj Ki Jai.